funk you up. Uptown Funk. Hey there, AP Human Geo students. Let's all learn about culture. And the way that I start the culture unit is I really like to deep dive into 9 interesting cultures around the world. And that's sort of how I'm going to dissect this entire giant presentation by just focusing on these 9 examples and really hitting some interesting things about these unique cultures around the world. This presentation isn't going to have too much writing in it. It's a whole bunch of pictures. So let's do it. Let's check it out. There we go. Diversity. Cool. Doop-de-doop. Boom. Friendship. Okay, here's some words you definitely got to know. Culture is comprised of the shared practices of religion and language. Those are the 2 big ones. Language is actually even bigger than religion. Technology, attitudes, and behaviors transmitted by a society. And I'll tell you this, I learned so much about culture growing up when I was in elementary school, middle school, high school. And honestly, I didn't do a whole lot of world traveling when I was young, so I didn't really get it. It was only when I went to South Korea and I lived in another culture and I was immersed in another culture where I really saw the differences in attitudes and the differences in behaviors, where I was like, whoa, the world's a different place. People have different thoughts on how certain things are supposed to happen in society. So boom, that blew my mind. Cultural traits, these are individual elements of culture. Those will be food preferences, architecture, land use. So the way that I've sort of heard it described is culture is the stuff you can't easily see. Cultural traits are the things you can easily see. And a lot of times they kind of overlap. And then the last thing is the cultural landscape is everything you can see that is a result of human interaction. The first major cultural landscape was humans inventing farming and irrigation in 10,000 BC. And the thing is, you've got to have farming if you want to be a serious culture. There are some people that, nomads, never really did farming, but they're not really super that serious. And I want to bring up the words the cultural landscape because that's actually the title of the textbook I used for this course. So the cultural landscape, this concept is just another way to describe everything about human geography. So, all right, let's check it out. So here's some hunter-gatherer societies way back in the day. They haven't invented farming yet. And I said, for the most part, they don't have an imprint on the cultural landscape. But let me see some of these other things here. Do they have a culture? I mean, they probably do have some behaviors. They probably do have some attitudes. But culture is something we can't really see. So it's kind of hard for us to really evaluate the full-on culture of our ancient ancestors. Cultural traits, on the other hand, let's see. Well, here they are cooking some fish or something in a campfire. And if that campfire, those stones and stuff are still there thousands of years later, we can argue that is their cultural landscape. Here's this dude drawing some stuff on a cave. That is cultural landscape. But for the most part, they're not really engaging with the environment or impacting it in a serious way when you're a hunter-gatherer. But however, once you start planting wheat everywhere, that is cultural landscape. And then here we go. This is these farming societies that grew up afterwards. So the houses are cultural landscape. Here they've definitely kind of created a little roadway. That's cultural landscape. They've got some fences around their field. That's cultural landscape. So it's all the things that humans are doing to alter the environment is the cultural landscape. And yeah, here's the first ever picture drawn by a human. I think this is a cave in France. And they're drawing some buffalo and horses and stuff. It's cool. All right, so name the cultural landscape you see in the pictures. So go ahead and give this one a shot. It's literally everything except for the sky, okay? Whenever you hear cultural landscape, be like, what did humans do to alter the natural environment of that picture? And this is Times Square in New York City, so clearly everything is cultural landscape. This one right here, what is cultural landscape? Look for it. It's the bridge and the Greek-style house in the back there. What is cultural landscape in this picture? Probably nothing. Some students will argue that it does look like it's kind of a field that was kind of cut in a straight line, so maybe that's arguably cultural landscape, but I think the human geography test would tell you there's no visible cultural landscape on this picture. This one, it's got to be the road. It's kind of hard for you to see maybe, but there is a road that goes down here, and I think this is a dam stopping this lake from just flowing out into the valley below. So that is the part of the cultural landscape you see here. This one, it's the road again. This road right here is not natural. Humans made that. There's a whole lot we can say about the cultural landscape here, because there's no way that Mother Nature would have plants naturally going in these gridded patterns. And then also the way that these fields have been farmed and plowed in these kind of intricate wavy lines definitely shows human interaction and human involvement. This would not happen in nature as well. Then we see a bunch of houses randomly, and we see some roads, so there's the cultural landscape there. What's the cultural landscape? It's the fence. It's the fence. All right, cool. Now let's talk about mentafacts and sociofacts. These are some interesting cultural concepts as well. So these are sort of like the main traits in culture, the unseen elements. And these terms specifically mean the rules of how people interact, the rules of social interaction. Like, for example, a mentafact in the United States is you don't just go up to a lady and just touch a lady, okay? You don't do that. That's very anti-mentafact. I know, like, also what I would say is a mentafact in this country is when you greet someone, unless if they're very, very close to you, you typically don't kiss them. But I know in Spanish and French culture, it's not unheard of to be like, oh, look, it's my best friend. Quick kiss. We typically don't do that here. But let's talk about some of these other mentafacts and sociofacts. So here's a funeral in Mozambique, and these people are wearing kind of like half clothes, and they're dancing, and this is a funeral. Like, the mentafact of the United States is we would never ever do that. Like, you wear black, it's kind of a sad, sobering experience, but in Mozambique, they treat funerals more kind of like a party. All right, and then we got recycling in Sweden. So none of these are legit trash cans. They're all actual, like, recycling cans. So they want you to sort out your various recyclable products. And here in the United States, we don't really care about that much. And then here's a greeting in, I don't know if it's Japan or Korea, but people are expected to bow to each other. That's something I had to learn how to do when I moved to Korea. And another thing I really want to mention is here in the United States, when someone sneezes, I mean, even if it's a total stranger and you're like, I don't know, in a bus with them or in a movie theater, and somebody sneezes, everybody just says, bless you. You know, it's just something you do, okay? It's the mentafacts of society. Someone sneezes, you say bless you. But in South Korea, people don't do anything. And I remember I just sort of instinctively did it. I was hanging out in like a restaurant or a bar, and somebody sneezed, and I sort of just said, bless you, in a kind of loud way. And all these Koreans were really confused. They're like, what did that white guy just say? And then, yeah, here, let me zoom in on some of these other ones. So, all right, yeah, bowing, bless you. All right, here's a guy at a convenience store in Hawaii. The traditional thing in the United States is we say no shirt, no shoes, no service. Well, this dude's just living the mahalo life. So he's walking into the store with only some shorts and boxers on, and he's probably going to be able to buy stuff fine. So that's just that's the different cultural mentafact in Hawaii. And then here's a wedding here in the United States. And I want to ignore the bride and the groom, but traditionally, well, okay, let's actually look at the bride. The traditional color of the bride at a wedding is to wear white. And the sort of unwritten rule for all the other girls who attend the wedding is you are to never also wear a white dress in its totality. Like, this girl's fine because she's in like zebra patterns here, but this guy brought his girlfriend probably from, I'm just going to guess, India, where they don't have this same cultural norm. So I bet when she showed up at this wedding in a white dress of her own, people probably like, girl, what are you doing? You're breaking the rules. Only the bride is supposed to wear white. And that's a mentafact. All right, and here, this is a mentafact that I learned personally when I was in London. This is back in 2008. I had this big, giant suitcase, and I was going up the escalator from the underground, and I saw, just like in this picture, how everybody is sort of standing on just one side of the escalator. And I was like, this is really weird. So I stood on that same side, and then I took my suitcase and I put it next to me in kind of this open blank space here. And as we're going up the escalator, I look behind me, and some dude is like running up this sort of second lane of human bodies here. And he says, "Excuse me, mate, will you move your bag?" And I'm like, "Oh, sorry." And it was just so weird to me because there was no like sign or no rule anywhere that said people should stand on the right side so you can make a running lane on the left side for anybody who's really in a hurry. But everybody does this. Like, this is just this unwritten rule in London. And I think that's super duper cool. It's an excellent example of Mentafacts and Sociofacts. And then here's just another weird fact, is that Korean pilots have the worst safety record, and it's not even close. Like, if you are a pilot who's trained in Korea, you will be more likely to crash and have problems and all this. And people really looked into it, and they're like, why is this the case? And it's because Korean culture, there's these really high levels of respect to someone who's sort of like your boss or your elder. And what they found out was, in almost every other culture in the world, when pilots are flying around, the pilot and the co-pilot kind of work together. But because of the way that Korean society is organized, it's whoever is considered the boss is supposed to never ever be challenged by someone who works underneath them. So they found that there's almost no correction done by a co-pilot to a main pilot in the Korean airlines industry. And they're right now trying to like really change that. They're trying to be like, hey, if you're a co-pilot and your other pilot is older than you, feel free to correct them when they make problems, okay? We don't want to crash any more planes. So it's sort of like Korea refuses to, that there's such a cultural position put on, if someone's older than you, you have to follow them, you have to respect them, even to the point where they crash planes because they won't break that cultural code. All right. So, okay, now I'm actually going to deep dive into those 9 examples I said at the beginning. So you're going to see a whole bunch of pictures, but this is what I want you to write down on these slides, and I'll remind you about these. I'll sort of tell you what to write down. Where in the world will you find these cultures? What is their language and religion? And then 3, 4, and 5, it might not apply to every culture, but maybe there's something cool about their architecture, something about their attitudes towards women, and maybe a unique cultural trait. All right, so that's what we're going to really study about as I go through the big culture examples. Okay, so the first one is the Karen people. Also, they're collectively known as the Hill tribes. You'll find them today in Thailand and Myanmar. And I think it's pretty clear to see what their unique cultural trait is based on these pictures. But the women in these tribes, as soon as they hit puberty, they start, well, actually, even it's before puberty, but puberty they really ramp it up. But they start putting these rings around their necks. And, shoot, I know I have it somewhere in my house. Should have had that ready for this. But I went to a tribe of these Karen people, and I bought one of their neck rings off of them, actually. So I have that as one of my cultural artifacts here in my house. And if you really study why do the women in this tribe wear necks, it's they sort of don't have a good reason for it. It's just kind of something they've always done. It's not really a religious significance. It's more of a beauty and a style significance. And it definitely gives them their own unique culture in doing this. But as you can see from this X-ray here, it's not that the women's necks get longer. It's that as these rings are put on a girl, especially in puberty, as her body changes and grows, the rings push her body down, and her spine continues to go up, kind of like a giraffe. So it's not that her neck is truly longer, it's that all of her internal organs are just more compressed together than a normal woman would be. And what to comment about the hill tribes? The thing is, the people of Thailand really don't like them. The hill tribe people, they're definitely discriminated against. They're not allowed to have jobs. People think these rings are kind of barbaric, and they think it's bad. I think it's cool. I think you should respect all cultures personally. But they're very, very poor. And I remember I gave them the equivalent of $5 for their neck ring, and they're like, "This is so great," and I'm like, "Oh man, like, oof, it's rough." So, but we could have a whole debate about if this is like oppressive towards women or if it's women allowing to express their cultures. But I do think there was a part of this cultural trait saying that if a man found out his wife was cheating on him, he could like break some of her rings while she's sleeping, and if she gets up, I mean, your spine all by itself is not very secure. So there's some issues we should deep dive talk about with the Karen people, but they're definitely a unique culture in our world today and one to know. So yeah, no doubt. All right, moving on. So this is where you'll find the Karens, especially in northern Thailand. And yeah, look at how long that neck is. Here's some long neck women hanging out. And actually, yeah, they have the rings on their legs too. So they really want to try to totally convert them into being as tall as possible. And then, yep, there they are ringing it up. That's the spine. Little girl starts to have rings on her. And here's some of the boys. Nothing with the boys. Boys just do whatever they do, I guess. And then, yep, there's ring girl. And this is where they live. They live in pretty old school conditions. All right, the next culture I really want to talk about are the Uyghurs of Xinjiang, China. Xinjiang is this super duper far western part of China. It's basically in the middle of Asia. And the cool thing about Uyghurs is they're kind of a big blend of a lot of different cultures. Like, this is a Uyghur guy, this is a Uyghur girl, and I mean, I guess according to their passport, they're Chinese, but they're just about as far from Chinese as you could possibly get, because they don't speak the Chinese language. They're all Muslims. That's a really important thing. They are of the Islamic faith. And they actually haven't really been a part of China's sphere for super long. I think they kind of only... they were conquered by the Chinese emperor back in like the year 1500, which isn't terribly long, historically speaking. And I know that today the Uyghurs are not being treated very well by the Chinese government at all. The Chinese government is really trying to enforce on them to have them stop being so into their religion. They also speak their own language that's pretty similar to the language of Turkey. And so they're trying to force these people to learn Chinese, especially Mandarin Chinese. Their architecture has a whole lot of Middle Eastern vibes to it. And the whole region of Xinjiang used to be this big place along the Silk Road where a lot of world trade went from the Middle East to China. So in a lot of ways, I feel like their cultural roots are a lot closer to the Muslim world in the Middle East, but they are owned collectively by China. And the Chinese are not doing well to them there. As far as any unique traits, I mean, they're just kind of half Chinese, half Muslims. They're people in the middle of the cultural crossroads of the world, and because of that, it's hard for them to sort of be adopted by either side. All right, so let's check out the Uyghurs. Let's see a lot of these pictures. So right here, that's where Xinjiang is. And this is kind of a cool political cartoon. They're sort of reaching beyond the Great Wall, and China's like, this is mine too. And then this is what Xinjiang looks like. Yeah, the Silk Road, that was kind of the big deal there. And then, yeah, here's some of these Uyghur guys. So you see they have some Chinese features, but also they're not Chinese. They've got maybe kind of some Russian features too. That's what you get when you're in the middle of the world. So yeah, here's some Uyghurs, and there they are being like, Muslims, what's up? And yeah, there's a traditional Uyghur instrument and their clothes and kind of the landscape they live in. They got some Russian vibes going on here. And yeah, that Uyghur dude totally looks white, okay? But he's Chinese, all right? And it's hard to call these people. There they are kind of eating in the traditional Muslim style. This is one of their mosques. There's another one of their houses. That's kind of the indoor space. Definitely a very Arabic feel to it. There they are praying. Here's a Uyghur girl. Yeah, top tier. Looking awesome. And yep, here's some more Uyghur women. All right, now let's talk about another pretty wildly different culture, the Basque people. And the Basques, they are the platypus of global cultures, okay? Like, I could say so many generalities about cultures from all over the world, but the Basques, they just break the rules, okay? They're the divide by zero culture, saying that this is the one thing that doesn't fit with everything else. Okay, so historically speaking, we don't even know when the Basques became a culture. They have been in this space kind of between Spain and France, but mostly in Spain for all of recorded human history. Like even back during the ancient Roman Empire, the Basques were there. So they've been there for at least 4,000 years. And the Basques, they used to have their own religion, but long time ago they converted to Catholic Christianity, so we don't have to worry about that. The thing you gotta know about these people is their language is so unique. The Basque language is still alive today, the people still speak it. It makes no sense. It has no relationship to English, to German, to French, to Latin, to Spanish, to Portuguese, to any African nation. It is its own thing. And that doesn't make historical sense. Okay? Historically speaking, their language should have a relationship to another language, but it doesn't. And it has puzzled historians for so long. And what we can confidently say, though, is the Basques, they live way up here in the Pyrenees Mountains. And you'll find most of the Basques in these, like, really difficult to get places. So they were definitely isolated for probably hundreds or thousands of years. And in that time of their isolation, they created their own language that has no relationship to any other language on planet Earth. So that is the big takeaway from the Basques. Not really anything to say too much about their architecture or their treatment of women, but I know that they, women total equality for the Basques, that's cool. But their cultural trait is their language makes no darn sense. And they are actually a very nationalistic people, and more the Basques are saying, we want to be our own country. Like, we want to break away from the rest of Spain. And actually, I'll talk about blood types, too, when I zoom in on that. That's another just wildly interesting thing. Okay, so let's go ahead and check all this out. So this is where you'll find the Basques, kind of in that top corner between Spain and France. Here's a closer up look at Basque country. So there it is. These are the traditional clothes of Basque women. Definitely not very stylish, just gonna say. And then Basque men, they also have this cultural thing where they dress up like, I don't know if these are bulls or woolly deer or something. And then here's some Basque dudes dancing. They really love the colors white and red. And then there's their flags. Got some green stripes on it too. And then tourists, remember, you are not in Spain or France. You are in Escalhiara, Basque country. And here's a Basque girl doing her thing. And then, yeah, here's Basque land. It's just pretty cool. And, I've got this little video you guys will watch about how wildly different Basque is. And then here's just another cool thing. So this is a map of the world of where you'll find the Rh negative blood types. This is like a really rare blood type, and you'll find so much of it in Basque country. So these people must have been so isolated for so long, they even had their own blood type mutation. So wild stuff. They're a very interesting cultural example to study. All right, moving on. So let's talk about the Dene, also known as the Navajo. Navajo is what they have sort of traditionally been called through history, but Dene is the better term. So we are trying to bring Dene back. And the Dene are a tribe of Native Americans. They are the largest tribe in the United States, and their tribal reservation is actually a fairly big part of the United States. It's this huge chunk of northern Arizona, New Mexico, and parts of Utah. So they're not too far away from us here in Las Vegas. You can definitely go and find some Dene people yourselves. But their language, they do have their own language called the Navajo language. And what's super cool about their language is that It was never translated into any books. It was never written down. And so when World War II happened, we got a whole bunch of guys from the Dene people, and we said, hey, speak your language over our radio, and the Japanese will never be able to translate it. And they did, and the Japanese were terribly confused the whole time because they didn't know how to make sense of their language at all because it was so unique and so different, and the Japanese had never been exposed to it before. So the code talkers of the Navajo people are definitely given some credit for a victory in World War II. That's pretty awesome. And their religion, they definitely have kind of the traditional Native American religions where you're talking to the Earth Spirit and stuff like that. My Native American friends, they'll fill me in on some more clean information on that. Their architecture, traditionally, their architecture is these kind of mud-based huts. So it's not a whole lot to talk about there. But I would say their unique cultural trait is they are the largest Native American group still in the United States. So that's pretty cool to know about them. All right, so there's Dene lands right there, and reclaiming Dene history. Don't mine uranium in the Grand Canyon. Yeah, okay, the Grand Canyon's a part of the Navajo Nation. All right, and here's some guys doing a powwow dance. There they are dancing away. It's pretty cool. Here's some of those code talkers that fought in World War II for us. And there they are doing the Navajo thing, Navajo country. And yeah, there's a whole lot of problems with alcohol and addiction. And this is a little bit about the Navajo religion. It's, believing in the earth spirit. That's the kind of vibe I want you to get from that. All right, I'll do the Amish and then I'll stop for now. So the Amish are a very interesting cultural group. You will find them in the northwestern United States, especially in the states of Pennsylvania and Ohio. And the story of the Amish is something like this. So there was these people in Germany about 200 years ago who immigrated over to the United States, and they practiced their own special version of Christianity. And according to their special version of Christianity, they said, okay, at this point in history where we're at, and I think by this time it was maybe 1860, we will no longer utilize any new technologies. So they gave up on technology about 150 years ago. So these Amish people, they have never really been exposed to smartphones, to televisions, to electricity, to I think we have forced like vaccinations on them and stuff. At first they weren't about that, but then they're like, okay, it'll save our kids' lives. So they are the people that do not want to participate in higher levels of technological society. And there's a lot of really interesting stories about the Amish. So that's what's up with them. They all speak English. Okay, they originally spoke German, but English is the lingua franca. Their architecture is definitely older architectural styles. I can zoom in on some of that. And I'll tell you, the Amish do not treat women very well. There is this cultural expectation that women are just supposed to have a lot of families. Men and women have a lot of segregated roles in Amish society, so that's kind of an issue that continually gets brought up in the United States. And also, if you'll notice, there's not a whole lot of stylistic choices for the Amish people. There sort of are certain clothes that each gender is always expected to wear. And also, you've got to be a part of their religion to be a part of their community. Yeah, that's just some really interesting stuff about Amish country. So let's check it out. All right, so that's where you'll find the Amish around the United States. Their hearth is definitely Ohio and Pennsylvania. And then, I'm definitely highlighting that. A lot in Indiana as well, but it seems like they're kind of spreading out more and more. But this is a great example of distance decay, because the further you get away from Pennsylvania and Ohio, the less and less Amish you're likely to see. And here's some Amish people doing their thing. And there they are, building a house. You'll notice all the Amish guys wear the same clothes, except for this dude. Oh, and this dude. But for the most part, it's blue shirts and jeans. So that's what's up. And then prepare to meet God, Amish ladies. And there's all the Amish hanging out in their horse and buggy. That's how they get around, even in 2020. The Amish, the Mennonites, their special religion, saying no technology. Here's some Amish kids playing baseball. And then here's they are going around in Pennsylvania. So if you ever find yourself in a rural part of Pennsylvania or Ohio, don't get too shocked when you see a horse and buggy taking some people around. And then there they are living it up. And then he gets made fun of on the internet. He'll never know. That's hey, this is a way to solve cyberbullying. Give up all technology. All right, I'll stop it there and continue on to the next one. Peace out.